My name is Jason, and I am a 47-year-old man who wants to share a painful chapter of my life in hopes of gaining some perspective on my situation. This story dates back 12 years when I was married to my first wife, Susan. Our marriage lasted for 7 years and we had 2 children together, Laura and Lucas, who were just 5 and 3 years old at the time. Like many families, we lived an ordinary life, filled with daily routines and small joys, until one fateful morning changed everything. On that day, I was driving to my office when a speeding vehicle collided with my car. The next thing I remember is waking up in a hospital bed, my body heavily bandaged and covered in plasters. A nurse gently informed me that I had been in a coma for 2 days. Overwhelmed with gratitude, I held my doctor's hand and thanked him for saving my life. I felt relieved to have survived, but little did I know about the hardships that awaited me. After a week of treatment, my doctor delivered devastating news. I was paralyzed from the waist down and there was a high chance I would never walk again. This news shattered my world. I watched as Susan broke down upon hearing this. It was a heavy burden for her to manage our home and take care of our children under these circumstances. I fell into a deep depression, unable to cope with the thought of living life in a wheelchair. Days turned into a blur as I stared at the dull walls of my hospital room, consumed by despair. I thought of all the things I would miss, playing soccer with my kids, dancing with my wife, and experiencing the freedom of movement. To make matters worse, Susan's visits became less frequent. In the beginning, she would bring our children to see me a few times a week. Those moments together were my lifeline, but as the days passed, her visits dwindled. I begged her to bring the kids more often, but she would say they didn't want to see me as much. Feeling hopeless, I struggled with the isolation. Then one day, everything changed. Susan handed me divorce papers, stating that she could not spend her life with a handicapped man. She claimed she was still young and deserved to be with someone who could provide her a normal life. I had sensed that our marriage was in trouble, especially when she began treating me colder, but I never expected the separation to come so soon, only a month after my accident. My friends later informed me that they had seen her out and about, holding hands with a man who was around 50 years old. Some speculated that she had been having an affair even before my accident. I was heartbroken and devastated. Just 2 months after the accident, I found myself not only paralyzed but also divorced. At that moment, I was filled with chaos and despair. I was in a wheelchair, without an income, and had no savings left. My previous financial responsibilities had drained all my savings. Thankfully, my insurance covered part of my hospital expenses, but I had to liquidate what I had left for my living costs. I was left with nothing and consumed by the urge to scream and curse my fate. I often wondered how I managed to hold myself together during those dark days, but there was a flicker of determination in me, possibly fueled by a desire for revenge. After my discharge from the hospital, I moved in with my parents. At 35, I was divorced, broke, and completely dependent on my elderly mother. She was a florist running a small shop in the suburbs, and her modest income, along with her pension, was barely enough to keep both of us afloat. It was a painful feeling for me, as a grown man, to rely on my 62-year-old mother for support. Soon after settling in, I decided to visit my children. However, when I arrived at our home, I found it locked. Neighbors informed me that Susan had moved in with her new partner, taking Laura and Lucas with her. I learned that her new boyfriend was a wealthy man who had been divorced 3 times and had no children of his own. It became clear to me that my family had been taken from me, and I was left to grapple with the painful reality of my new life. Some people have gone so far as to label Susan a gold digger and a cheapster. They claim that she chose to sleep with an older, grumpy man solely for his money. After much effort, I managed to find the address of her new boyfriend and went to his house. When I arrived at Susan's new home, she refused to let me see our children. She insisted that the kids had already adjusted to her boyfriend, who they apparently call Daddy. Susan told me that my sudden appearance would only confuse them more. When I persisted in wanting to meet them, she threatened to obtain a restraining order against me. I felt powerless. I didn't have a single penny to spend on a lawyer and was struggling to get by on my mother's limited income. So, reluctantly, I backed off. It was less than 6 months after my accident, and only a few months had passed since our divorce was finalized. The thought that she had already moved in with another man filled me with disgust. I confronted her, asking how she could abandon me and move on so quickly. I acknowledged that my feelings were immature, but I was a helpless father confined to a wheelchair. I pleaded with her for just one chance to show my worth. In response, she belittled me, labeling me as a burden in her life. I couldn't help but ask if she had been unfaithful before our divorce, given that our divorce had been settled only a month ago, and she was already living with her new partner. With a dismissive wave, she told me it was none of my business and that I should never show my ugly face to her again. As I stood there, I contemplated the 7 years we had spent together as a married couple. The realization that she had replaced me with another man in just a few months was devastating. With tears streaming down my face, I left her house feeling utterly defeated and humiliated. Back at my mother's place, I broke down crying like a small child. She consoled me and urged me to take charge of my life. At that moment, I felt lost and without direction. To regain some sense of purpose, I joined my mother in her flower shop. I began helping her with tasks like making bouquets, serving customers, and cleaning the store. Over time, I started to see the potential for growth in the business, but my mother was too fragile to manage it on her own. I reached out to my old contacts and secured contracts with event management companies to supply flowers for their occasions. Gradually, I built a small team and began taking contracts for venue decorations. Eventually, I launched my own event management company. It took me 12 long years to rebuild my life. Throughout this journey, my mother stood by my side, offering unwavering support and encouragement as I worked to bounce back. A year after my accident, I discovered that Susan planned to leave the city with our children and her boyfriend. I rushed to her house to try to see the kids, but I was too late, they had already left. Before this, I had attempted to reach out to them multiple times, but each time Susan had insulted me and chased me away. Susan had full custody, allowing her to make all decisions regarding the children. Given my physical and financial limitations, I couldn't contest for joint custody. I couldn't challenge her restraining order either, as I was too broke to hire a lawyer. Meanwhile, Susan was with Evan, a wealthy man who possessed considerable family wealth. I had no idea if he had been in her life before my accident or if he had come along afterward, but what was clear was that he had the means to control the situation. In the 12 years since my initial struggles, I pursued every lead I got about my children. I would travel to meet them, but each time Susan threatened to have me arrested. Her boyfriend's resources allowed them to evade any consequences for their actions. Despite living together for over a year, Evan never married Susan. After a long time, I finally decided to file for joint custody. I was waiting for my event management business to stabilize before taking this step. I managed to hire a competent lawyer who presented my case well, and I was granted visitation for 15 days. My children, now teenagers aged 17 and 15, were asked if they wanted to meet me, and they affirmed their desire to do so. While I know that I can't make up for the lost years, I genuinely wish to spend quality time with them. As the visit approaches, I feel a mix of nerves and excitement. I am aware that being a teenager comes with its own set of challenges, and I hope my children will not be unkind during our time together. My children are not inherently mean or extremely toxic, yet I find myself in a precarious position regarding the stories that Susan, their mother, may have relayed to them over the past 12 years. It raises a significant question in my mind: should I openly share the truth about their mother with them? The uncertainty is overwhelming, and I am seeking suggestions on how best to approach this delicate situation. I feel an intense mix of nervousness and excitement as I contemplate reconnecting with them after so long. To provide a clearer picture, I must share an important update with you. I initially overlooked two crucial pieces of information in my earlier post. The first pertains to my current wife, Amy. Yes, I remarried 5 years ago to an amazing woman named Amy, who is an interior designer. Our meeting was quite serendipitous. I encountered her at an event where she was in charge of designing the wedding venue, and I was there providing floral arrangements. At that time, I had not yet ventured into starting my own business. While it wasn't love at first sight, we connected well and continued to see one another at various events in the subsequent months, developing a friendship along the way. Amy was also a single mother to a 3-year-old daughter at that time. The idea of starting an event management company together was actually Amy's. Given her extensive experience working for a company in the industry, she had the necessary contacts and knowledge to make it a success. I decided to partner with her to launch this venture. We dated for a year before taking the step of marriage, and now we happily live as a family of 4, which includes Amy, her daughter Mia, my mother, and myself. Mia was absolutely thrilled to have a grandmother, and my mother felt the same joy about gaining a granddaughter. The second piece of information I neglected to mention concerns an accident compensation situation. I was involved in a serious accident where I was struck by a speeding truck. Under normal circumstances, I should have received compensation from the logistics company responsible for the truck. However, at that time, the company managed to evade accountability by manipulating the circumstances surrounding the accident and wrongfully attributing the blame to me. Unfortunately, I could not afford to hire a competent lawyer to fight the case, which resulted in me receiving no compensation. This is often the tactic that large corporations utilize. They invest heavily in legal teams to protect their interests. After marrying Amy, she encouraged me to revisit the idea of pursuing the case again, now that we could afford a capable attorney. Currently, we are still in the process of the case, but my lawyer has provided an optimistic insight indicating that the judgment may lean in our favor. Returning to my narrative, as I mentioned 3 months ago, my children were scheduled to visit me after 12 long years following my divorce. The anticipation of seeing them again was both thrilling and nerve-wracking. Amy has been incredibly supportive throughout this experience. When the time came to pick them up from the airport, I felt a whirlwind of emotions. Laura, my eldest, is now 15, while Lucas, my younger son, is 13. They have transformed into striking teenagers. Upon our initial greetings, an unexpected awkwardness settled in, leaving us struggling for conversation. I attempted to ease the tension during the drive home by asking them about their school life and experiences in their current city. I consciously avoided discussing their mother, and they also refrained from bringing her up. Their silence was unusual. They seemed more interested in the prospect of plugging in their earphones, much like any typical teenager would. When we finally arrived home, we were greeted by Amy, whose presence seemed to shock my children. It baffled me, considering their mother had been living with another man shortly after our separation. Why were they surprised at my decision to remarry? Amy had prepared the guest room for them, and we all sat down for lunch together. She also shared our family vacation itinerary. Their reactions were neutral at best. They were neither enthusiastic nor dismissive, leaving Amy and me puzzled by their mixed sentiments. Soon after, they retreated to their room, and shortly thereafter, I received a phone call from Susan. She accused me of tricking our children into coming to my house so that Amy and I could manipulate them. Her words left me feeling disoriented and confused. She claimed that I was concealing the truth about my marriage, and I struggled to understand her accusations. After hanging up, Susan continued to call, which prompted me to confront the situation. I gathered my children and asked them what was bothering them. Initially hesitant, they eventually opened up, expressing their anger towards me. Susan had filled their minds with the notion that I had abandoned them, effectively brainwashing them against me with a mix of lies and deceit. It was important for me to share the complete truth with them, so they could understand the situation from my perspective. The reality was that their mother did not stay committed to her family. As soon as she found the chance, she left for another man. Back then, the children were young, yet the events remained vivid in their memories. I recounted to them the story of how Susan had taken them away to the house of this older man. Whenever I tried to reach out, she would confront me, driving me away with threats. To show them how serious the situation had been, I shared the restraining order I had received and the many times I had pleaded to see them, all of which had been ignored. Their eyes filled with tears as they realized they had been misled by their mother's lies for so long. My younger son, Lucas, revealed that he once attempted to contact me through social media. Unfortunately, Susan discovered this and emotionally manipulated him into promising never to reach out to me again. The children also shared how they faced harsh treatment from Susan's husband. During family gatherings, they felt out of place and unwelcome because they were not married. Even though this man provided for their education, he never acted like a father to them. Hearing about their struggles broke my heart. Once all the truths were revealed, we embraced each other and cried freely. We then decided to take a week-long vacation in Florida, where we made wonderful memories together. Laura and Lucas connected beautifully with Amy and Mia, who was about to celebrate her 8th birthday. Seeing all of my family together brought me immense joy. During the trip, my children posted photos of us together on social media, captioning them as "Happy Family." When Susan saw these pictures, she called them immediately, scolding them for what she deemed foolish behavior and accusing them of betraying her by forming a bond with me. She sent me threatening messages, warning that she would do everything in her power to prevent me from seeing my children again if I tried to turn them against her. I found her threats amusing and continued to enjoy our vacation. Upon returning from Florida, my children met with my relatives, who welcomed them with open arms. It was heartwarming to see the old connections being revived. Before they left, they promised to keep in touch, no matter what Susan said. They expressed their feelings of suffocation within that household and shared that they planned to return to live with me once they finished high school. I hugged them tightly as we said our goodbyes, feeling hopeful for the future. After returning home, they confronted Susan about her manipulative behavior, but she twisted the narrative, blaming me for influencing them against her. It has been several months since their visit, but we maintain regular communication. I am hopeful that I will have my children back again soon. I will keep you updated on any developments. As for the latest news, I realize it has been a while since my last update. There has been a lot of turbulence in the past 6 months since I first reunited with my children. The court case involving the logistics company was finally resolved. To my delight, I received substantial compensation, not just for the accident itself, but also for the injustices I faced during the initial trial. In the first trial, the logistics company had manipulated the case to make it look like the accident was my fault, which left me without compensation. At my wife's suggestion, I chose to appeal the decision and ultimately succeeded. I shared the good news with my children, who were just as thrilled as I was. They expressed a strong desire to see me again, and I assured them that I would make arrangements for them to come back to live with me permanently. A month later, out of the blue, Susan came to my office. To my surprise, she took my hand and asked for forgiveness. I was stunned by her sudden appearance. She confessed that after my accident, she felt desperate and had turned to an older man who wanted a sugar baby. I didn't know the meaning of that term at the time, so I had to look it up later. She explained that this man had previous bad experiences with younger women who had left him after taking his money. So, he opted for someone older and more stable. At 32 years old, Susan had 2 children, which she believed would assure her loyalty to him. According to her, the man was clear about not wanting to marry her. He preferred to keep her as a mistress to avoid sharing his inheritance with my children. Susan accepted his terms because he promised to support her and pay for their education. I asked her why she didn't get a job to help fund the children's education. She responded by saying she had never worked before and wasn't sure if she could earn a lifestyle similar to the one her lover provided her for free. She repeatedly insisted that she was doing everything in her power to protect our children's future. She firmly believed that if she hadn't made that choice, our kids would have grown up in poverty. I felt my frustration build as she kept going on and on. Finally, I couldn't take it anymore and yelled at her, telling her that she could have at least given me a chance to recover. If she was genuinely worried about our children's future, she should have talked to me first instead of making rash decisions and leaving me without any warning. I made it clear that I had moved on with my life and that her pleas were falling on deaf ears. In response, she began to recount all the happy moments we had shared, like our wedding day and the joyful memories of the births of our 2 children. I shrugged her off, stating that I was a different person now and those memories had faded away and no longer held any significance for me. Then she crossed a line when she declared that she and our children were my real family, not Amy and MIA. She insisted that MIA was not truly my daughter and that I could never have a proper family with Amy and MIA. Her words filled me with disgust. She continued to push for me to take her back, claiming that we could reunite as a real family. I firmly told her that my love lies with Amy and MIA, they are my real family, not her. She refused to leave my office, causing a scene. It was only when I threatened to call the police that she finally walked out. Afterward, I went home and told my mother and Amy about the confrontation. Amy was understandably upset by it, but she handled it with maturity and didn't make a fuss. My mother chimed in, expressing that she had never liked Susan due to her selfish nature. She even suggested that Susan had only come back because of the money I received after the court settlement. My mother called her a gold digger, and I couldn't help but agree. When my children found out about their mother's behavior, they were really upset with her and told her to stay away from me. I'm not sure how her new partner found out about the incident, but he threatened to end their relationship if she tried to contact me again. I couldn't be more grateful to him for that. The latest news is that my children are moving in with me this month. They plan to stay with us temporarily before heading off to a nearby college. They are excited about experiencing college life and staying in a dorm. I believe it's important for us to stay connected while also giving each other space to grow closer. My children have chosen to distance themselves from Susan, and in the end, she is left with nothing but her sugar daddy. I hope she enjoys it while she can, but I also hope it turns sour for her eventually.